Ukrainian comics is a new form of national culture. How did drawn stories evolve from ancient times to the present day? Lviv Publishing House, which carries out the most daring graphic projects. The UATV team traveled backstage to the young Ukrainian comic book industry and came across lots of interesting stories. "35 meters high, almost 4 meters in diameter, and weighing hundreds of tons. That is Trajan's column in Rome, and this is how the first superhero comic in history looks like. Today, there is a statue of the Apostle Peter at the top, but before the 16th century, the monument was crowned by a figure of the great emperor-conqueror, Trajan, who lived at the turn of the 1st and 2nd centuries of our era, conquered Dacia twice. Today it is the territory of Romania, Moldova and partly of Ukraine. The emperor's military success impressed his contemporaries so much that written chronicles alone did not seem enough. Architect Apollodor of Damascus has developed a grandiose, even for those times, project of the first triumphal column of that type. It consists of a multitude of multi-toned marble blocks placed on top of each other, and along their circle, skilled artists depicted 155 scenes from 2 Dacian campaigns in a spiral. Something like the stories and pictures created by the ancient Egyptians on the walls of the tombs, but the hieroglyphs are still like words. What they did for Trajan looks more like modern comics. Here the Romans and Dacians are meticulously drawn along with their weapons, and in total the researchers counted 2,662 characters. The emperor himself appears 58 times in the best light, well, like a Roman superhero. Archaeologists believe that it was possible to read the 30-meter comic from the balconies of 2 neighboring libraries. Fortunately, today's drawn stories are much more accessible, but this does not mean that they are easier to make. Often a bright idea simply does not find embodiment. There is a man in Lviv who helps comic book authors of the future. "I have an idea. I painted the cover, but I don't know what will happen next. Let us write it all out and figure out what will come of it. And you say, let's try, we'll see where these roads take us." Bogdan Kordoba founded the Ukrainian Comic Book Assembly. This publishing house does not reprint foreign comics, but tries to develop the Ukrainian industry. We cooperate in the international arena with artists from other countries, screenwriters from other countries, but still these ideas, these plots are made for Ukrainians, based on Ukrainian realities. Well, or at least I can say that we try our best. See next, how did Bogdan Kordoba manage to launch a publishing project with $11 in his pocket? What is the path taken by a comic from the author's idea to its pictures on paper? And how did Ukraine manage to attract an overseas guest who now draws in Lviv? Master of Crafts presents 3 graphic projects. American comics are known all over the world today, thanks mainly to large-scale screen versions of them. As a rule, these are various heroes in masks who restore justice and fight insidious villains. This has been the request of youth culture based on entrepreneurship for decades. However, stories in picture form actually came to the US from Europe some time ago. In 16th century Spain, printed leaflets were sold with consistent illustrations of the lives of the saints. This narrative form was later transferred to newspapers, and then it really began to flourish. It all starts with political satire. Satire on the topic of the day, satire on ordinary everyday situations in so-called comic strips. This is a comic where the entire story is told on just one page, some short story, jokes and so on. Then it gains momentum because people understand that much more serious topics can be presented through comics. As a result, 2 independent worlds emerged in the 20th century: American serial comics with vivid fiction and European ones, where the stories were strictly finite and realistic. In Ukraine, in the decades of Soviet power, this culture froze in one permissible form: caricature magazines like Peretz aka Pepper. When the Iron Curtain fell, young Ukrainians began eagerly studying foreign comics, but for more than 20 years, local authors did not offer their stories. It seems that the events of 2014 became a catalyst. The country needed heroes, and not only in reality. At university, Bogdan Kordoba learned to publish books, and only in 2017 he realized that he wanted to print comic books. You know, there are vending machines with food, chewing gums, candy bars, everything. I think cool, but why not have books or comics like that? I thought about a budget estimate. At that time, it was about 70,000 hryvnia for a prototype. I am a student. It's clear I do not have that kind of money. Nobody wants to invest in such a crazy idea, and I came to the simplest solution. I made a sloping wooden shelf for 4 books. I have 300 hryvnia in my pocket. I took various comics to sell. I borrowed from somewhere. I found a few too. Bogdan set the shelf in Lviv co-working locations and stood there as a seller. He hoped that at least someone would be interested in Ukrainian comics, then the authors themselves published them. What happened next was a huge surprise for Bogdan. We did not expect this. I did not expect it at all. A phone call. I heard you've got into comics. You have such a cool shelf. Come to us on Monday. Let's have a chat. Let's make it together. And requests from very strange places. We set up these shelves and in quest rooms. I thought, God, why would you have comics in a quest room? But no, it all took off. In just 3 to 4 months, we already had 17 points of sale. And it was on this foundation that the Ukrainian Comic Book Assembly appeared in Lviv. At the beginning of 2019, the publishing house was just 1.5 years old. Bogdan Kordoba tells what his team has achieved in such a short period of time, what stories they develop for their readers, and in general, how this is done. The city of Uptown is hungry for justice. Corruption has penetrated into every sphere of life, with anxiety growing in society with every day. And just a few heroes decided to do something that others did not dare. They decided to act. Today, the Uptown Chronicles are one of the most significant series of Ukrainian comics. Avengers and masks against corrupt figures are so relevant for any country. The author, Kyiv resident Mikhailo Pimenov, selected an international team from Scotland and Greece through the internet, the scriptwriter and illustrators. They managed to bring the Uptown Chronicles as a free web comic to begin with, and then Bogdan Kordoba learned about the project. I wrote to Mikhailo, isn't it time for you to move to the big league from the internet and bring your story to the people? He replied, yes, come on, why not? Let's try. This is a case when the whole story has already been created. Here, the work of the publisher was in fact limited to production, but thanks to the paper edition, the Uptown Chronicles became known throughout Ukraine. With the increasing popularity of the comic, Bogdan began to print editions of the same name newspaper from that world. And in the Lviv store, you can even try on the masks of the characters. After all, according to the canon of the story, absolutely everyone is able to become a fighter against abuses committed by those in power. In the meantime, the Black Army with the blackest intentions brings chaos and destruction to all living things on black and white pages. This is the unnamed comic of a Lviv guy called Dmitro Hook. This is a dark fantasy, and in the medieval setting that is standard for this genre, and I tried to make it as dark as possible so that there is a dark fantasy. To be able to say this is the darkest one among all dark fantasies. Dmitro is an author and an artist rolled into one. He has been drawing comics literally half his life. He's now 20 years old. Unnamed began from a simple idea. It occurred to me at the beginning of 2016. What if we create a comic about an unnamed, which came from who knows where? It began its march and they twist some cool story around it. According to the canons of dark fantasy, there are no uniquely positive and negative characters in this story. Everybody is just more or less gray on a moral scale. The comic's noir is enhanced by artistic technique. Dmitro draws in pencil sketches only with a black pen. All of this will be scanned into the computer, adjustments will be made there, dialogues will be added, as I did not put these clauses for the text in the previous picture on paper. I decided to add them later, as the dialogue might change a little, so the sizes of windows will be increased or decreased. It will be better this way. Of course, all this is agreed with Bogdan. Dmitro sends him the materials that should be included in the first volume, and the author and publisher discuss the corrections together. They can relate to both the plot structure and the drawing of individual scenes. Everyone must do their own work. The artist draws, the screenwriter writes. And if the artist and screenwriter, as in the case of Dmitro Hook, is one person, he needs to work twice as hard on the plot and the drawing. In some aspects, it is easier, but in others, it is very difficult. Sometimes Bogdan's guests are artists who do not know how to write comic book scripts and scriptwriters who have no drawing skills. The staff of the publishing house always has someone available to complement each of the positions. The script is followed by frame-by-frame sketches for a comic book. The composition of the page, precisely how it is divided into sections, is a complex science. As for the drawings themselves, Bogdan seeks to achieve a seemingly impossible effect when working with the creators. You don't even notice when you yourself read the sound faster than you read the text. And when you read the text and see the picture, this sound is already working. Exclamations, explosions, fight, running, emotions. And these too must be worked out immediately. The liner follows the sketches. It is an almost finished drawing without lines alone. Furthermore, if the comic is a color one, they are filled with a colorist, so Dmitro Huk is responsible for all these stages in the case of the unnamed. But there is a separate expert who deals with him with the design of the font and clouds for the dialogues, using bubbles. In the end, there is a need to correctly transfer the comics to paper. This dark fantasy has so many small strokes and shades of black that an unsuccessful print can completely destroy the impression. This all goes to the layout, to the designer. We do a test print, we look at the pictures of the comic book on paper. This stage is incredibly important, because if you draw horror, you can't have a glossy story. You lose all the essence at once. Why did you draw these terrible creatures if they shine like dolls? During 2019, Bogdan's publishing house must release at least 2 comics, in which the print quality will be a decisive factor for success. This artist intends to tell different stories not just in pictures, but in the form of oil paintings.
You can put the painting directly in a picture and with draws too, and in computer. I am interested in make a mix between graphic novel and art book.
Max Sear is a Chilean theater director and artist. His original production based on Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll impressed audiences in Central America, and the exhibitions of paintings that he used on stage were successfully held throughout Europe. But such an audience was still not enough for the artist.
In the theater, it's very close and it's very powerful, the things with the audience, but it's very limited too. You have like, I don't know, 100 sometimes. 2 or 3 or 500, but in graphic novel you go for 1,000 of people in the same work, and I love the communication with the people.
And then he met me, a man who loves graphic stories, so that the drawing had a continuation, and Max just painted so many pictures that it will not take place as an art book, and it will not fit into the exposition either. We seemed to be in the same time and one place with each other. A graphic novel is usually called a comic, where there is practically no text and the story is told visually, or a strictly limited series. Max still wants to leave the text, but put it on separate pages, just like in an art book. At the same time, the comic should be complete and without explanation, so for the integrity of the narrative, Max has to specially finish making pictures of his Alice. Later, the Chilean director put Shakespeare's Hamlet, already with the expectation of a future graphic novel. Months of work in Lviv paid off. Max was especially impressed by the performance based on Lesya Ukrainka's forest song at the Les Kurbas Theater.
I really surprised with the beautiful Ukrainian culture. It's so amazing, maybe because it's very different. I am Latin American people. So when I come for this theater and I see this play, I love all this place. It's very beautiful. And I love all Carpathian culture.
Inspired by it, Max Sear undertook the 3rd project. So far he's drawing actors in stage costumes, but exactly what will come of this, who knows?
This project is born like 2 weeks ago, something like that. So it's a very young project, and we will see. I think it's more like an art book about the Ukrainian culture, because it's very beautiful. And I use this place like a model too.
No matter what happens in the end, under the terms of the agreement with Bogdan, the first projects of the Chilean artist will be seen in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian language, and only then perhaps all over the world. The publisher supports the fact that these shelves are filled with exciting Ukrainian comics. There should be twice as many this year.